My name is Kayla Shoup, and I'm in Group 3. My other group members are Madison Smith, Benjamin Lee Vick, Bryce Martin, and Ethan Smith. We will be covering Chapter 3, Further Ethical Challenges in the Leader-Follower Relationship. This chapter follows Part 2 of the book, The Moral Relationship Between Leaders and Followers. I will be going over the introduction as well as the sources of ethical challenges. Further ethical challenges in the leader-follower relationship. Other group members are Madison Smith, Benjamin Lee Vick. Hi everyone, my name is Kayla Shoup, and I'm in Group 3. My other group members are Madison Smith, Benjamin Lee Vick, Bryce Martin, and Ethan Smith. We will be covering Chapter 3, Further Ethical Challenges in the Leader-Follower Relationship. This chapter follows Part 2 of the book, The Moral Relationship Between Leaders and Followers. I will be going over the introduction as well as the sources of ethical challenges section of this chapter. The chapter opens with the statement that ethics and power are basic to leader-follower relations. Ethics and power are interdependent, which means that ethical behavior depends on the different level of power being exercised by the leader. It's important to create a mutual, fair, and shared power in order to develop trust and loyalty between a leader and a follower. Through good teamwork and open communication, leaders and followers can practice the shared power. In order to be successful in these practices, the availability of information is extremely important. The book says, however, because information is used as a commodity of power, withholding it by failing to inform or wanting not to be informed, or deniability of responsibility are ethical failings. Some leaders are hungry for power and its advantages, to the point that they keep secrets and hide information from everyone, including their board and close followers. The book offers an example of such ethical failings through Stanley O'Neill, a former CEO of Merrill Lynch. The financial firm was experiencing heavy losses, and O'Neill chose not to inform his board about the issue. He also failed to include them in on his plans to merge with Wachovia Bank. His non-inclusive leadership style led to his removal. A leader whose mind is only set on power has an inability to recognize distributive justice. The book states that such leaders are found to be uncaring about how their actions are actually seen and reacted to by followers, and they are dismissive of consultation. This type of leading is referred to as leader-centric, which is leading from the top down. It prevents having the benefits of shared functions and may also invite ethical failings by a leader's display of such impaired conduct. Moving on to the sources of ethical challenges section, we learn that ethical conduct and considerations of moral values are significant for leader-follower relations, but also are a source of challenge in them. The book calls on Joseph Ross' claim that leadership is an influence relationship that should reflect mutual purposes. This contrasts leader-centrism in that leadership is better to be considered a process rather than a person or state. The book relates this process to a voyage through time and says, a leader is not a sole voyager, but a key figure whose actions or inactions can determine others' well-being and the broader good. However, the process is full of ethical challenges due to a leader's judgments being based on certain values and the influence it has on their relationships with others. The book shares John Gardner's view with us, saying that values are part of the moral framework that permits us to judge some purposes as good and others as bad in leadership. This view offers the idea that change is best achieved by a consultative process rather than being forced.
I'm Madison Smith, and I'm doing the Inclusive Leadership section of Chapter 3. This section opens with a quote that states, "Doing things with people rather than to people is the essence of inclusive leadership." I liked this because, to me, inclusive means to include every everything and everyone. And in terms of leadership, I thought that it was important to say that everyone has an opportunity, and it's how you choose to handle the opportunity that's important. For example, being an effective leader is not just directing them and ordering them to do something. To be effective, you have to listen to people and understand them and learn them and really just include them in everything that they do. I think it's important that as leaders, we also take the time to learn from other people. Um, I also think that this relates back to the Dancing Boy video that was shared earlier this semester, because it said in the video it said that the first follower is the second leader, and I think that that was saying how you react to something is important and it's noticed, and the more followers you have, the better of a leader you are. The next section breaks down important concepts needed for inclusive leadership, and the first being listening. And I think listening is an important aspect in all aspects of life, not just in leadership. But in terms of leadership, it's a sign of respect and recognition, and that was from the book. The second important concept was participation, and the text states, given that leadership need not be the total responsibility of only one person or those with formal authority, but may be generated by informal process called upward influence followers. To me, this quote is saying that one person can't do it alone, and that also going back to the Dancing Boy, it stated that without followers, there can't be leaders, which is exactly what the quote was saying. I think participation can relate to other things as well. For example, in baseball, a team can't just rely on one player to win the game. They all have common goals, and it takes multiple people. And while some of them may be better than others, they need everybody's participation to compete in the game. Going forward in this section, it states that leadership and followership are interrelated, and this means that instead of having the leader-centric view of participation, participation from followers is needed in giving ideas and decision making. So it's really taking the idea of leadership or leaders and using their followers' opinions, getting ideas, and I think that's important in jobs, especially, and really in school. I think part of this section of leadership where we're having to take different sections of the book and teach each other is kind of an example of this. It basically says that involvement of the followers is essential in improving quality and success. So the more that we learn from each other, we're improving the leaders. Cultural and universal differences have been found in the way followers perceive leaders in terms of expectations. The Globe Research Program is an international group who studied leadership worldwide, and their goal was to learn what's considered leadership regarding psychological welfare and international competitiveness. And this study found a lot of important attributes, but the one that stuck out to me the most was that integrity was of the 21 leadership attributions that were found to be positive. And I definitely believe that integrity is important and something that leaders should have to be respected. But I thought this number would be higher because I don't feel that you can be an effective leader without being respected by your followers, and that's what I see as integrity. This section continues with discussing how Bill Gates earned respect by allowing his followers to discuss and come up with solutions as a team. And it states he was not losing, but gaining respect by listening for good suggestions. And I think this is saying that even though all of the opinions may not have been the best, he still was willing to listen to them and work with them to come up with a solution rather than just telling them what was going to happen and what wasn't going to happen. Further through this section, it says it was talking about a case, and in 2013, the case involving the Transportation Security Administration changed a policy to allow small knives back onto planes, and this caused people to protest, especially flight attendants. And up until 2 days before the policy was set to be effective, the TSA announced that they would take the feedback from the people, and this was used as an example to show how one leader let his role become higher, meaning that he didn't take into consideration the people that worked for him. So his followers weren't important, and he took his, I guess, higher standard more. He was basically saying that his opinion was greater than anybody else's, and that is not an effective leader. Towards the end of the section was my favorite quote on page 60 that stated, "The wise leader settles for good work and lets others have the floor. The leader does not take all the credit for what happens and has no need for fame." And that was from Lao Tzu, I think is how you say it. I think this quote is perfect for this section because inclusive literally means to include, and to include means everybody and everything. And by finding good work and allowing others, meaning the followers, the opportunity to make it great makes for a better leader. And I think more so now we hear of leaders who take all the credit because they want fame and fortune. But I definitely believe that to have inclusive leadership, you have to have the ability to listen to others and allow them to participate without caring what kind of credit you're going to receive for it. And that's going to, in turn, make you a more respected leader. So that's all for my section. Thanks.
My name is Benjamin Vick, and I'm going to be continuing on with Chapter 3. My section is Leaders, Performance, and Misleaders. Peter Drucker famously stated, "Leadership is performance," and that is doing, not dash. He also coined the term misleaders for those who are poor at leading. The question is, what earns a favorable judgment on our leaders' performance? Who sets the goals? Who determines whether they have succeeded or not succeeded? Who determines what they've done is right? Presidential nominee or a president or somebody running in some form of government, they set the agenda for the public to understand what their goals are. Leaders are symbols who can be fired to convey a sense of rooting out of a problem, whether they did right or wrong, or whether they should be fired or not. It's more of a symbol of the act of doing it. To be a leader is to be responsible. Yet there are leaders or misleaders that are dysfunctional and remain in their positions. Actually, there are a lot of those who remain in their positions, based on whether or not they are qualified or unqualified, or they should be fired or not. Erland Hogan said, "There is no inbuilt tendency to use power responsibly. You cannot randomly allocate leadership responsibly and expect the interest of justice or society to be well served. Those in charge have a responsibility to make moral decisions greater than those they command." CEO and chairman of the board of J.P. Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon, was challenged in a stockholder rebellion in the spring of 2013. There was a decline in the trust from the damage of a multi-billion-dollar trading loss and the crisis that followed the concern. The banks have not altered their risky investment strategies even after the market crash of 2008, when taxpayers had to bail out a lot of big businesses and big banks. JP Morgan was not one of these, but still they felt the CEO should practice better strategies and not be so risky with the money. Chase's risk was in hedging bank funds with a loss initially stated at $2 billion. Demon said it was a stupid mistake and it was tempest the teapot, as he pointed out, or as he said it. 2 months later, Demon updated the loss at $5.8 billion. Then, in a bipartisanship U.S. Senate report, announced the loss at $6.2 billion. Initially blamed on a rogue bank trainer in London, the London Well, as they famously named him, his chief in charge of the investment office stated she played no role in revising the risk model that led to the huge loss. She knowingly knew that the portfolio was in breach of the firm's risk limit, but yet allowed it anyway, stating senior management of JP Morgan agreed to delay a move to stop this portfolio. Recklessness tied to speculation and derivatives still is in the banking system, and this puts the public at a great risk. The chief in charge of this rogue trader retired later that year. Her $16 million compensation package was still intact, and the CEO's salary dropped from a mere $23 million to $11.5 million. Equity, accountability, and responsibility are all concerns here. Again, demands from the public came to try to divide these big banks so they are no longer too big to fail and no longer will be able to be bailed out with the taxpayers' money again. U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder explained a lack of cases against these big banks. He said it was because of their size that if we do bring a criminal charge, it will have a negative impact on the national economy and perhaps even the world economy. How such leaders' statements and actions are perceived by followers has broad ethical and performance consequences. One effective attributional view is to make even more explicit the significance of how a leader are evaluated, not least regarding expectations about leaders' competence and motivations. The term derailment by Morgan McCall, Michael Lombardo, and Ann Morrison, with 400 promising managers, seemed to be on the fast track. Those who failed to reach their expected potential were more often found to lack skills in relating to others, but not a deficit in their technical skills. The follower's view is instructive in understanding leaders' behaviors and effects. Hollander and Kelly used the critical incidence technique, and they drew a sample of 293 respondents, half female, half male. 2/3 held professional or administrative positions, and the majority were full-time. They were asked to write a description of an incident that had occurred between them and a superior in which either good leadership or bad leadership was displayed. The project was anonymous, and other follow-up questions then asked what they found rewarding or not from what the superior did and said as a leader, what the response was, and what the effect this event had on the leader relationship with the superior. Respondents also rated the leader on a scale. Content analysts of the first open-ended question indicated that in good leadership, leaders were seen to be supportive, have good communication skills, and providing clarity and or being good listeners, be action result oriented, delegate to and or empower subordinates to be fair. In bad leadership, leaders were reported to be unsupportive, showing a lack of communication skills, to be uninvolving, unfair, angry or harsh, autoritocratic, and at times to be poor managers of resources. The major findings of this research show that relationships qualities were emphasized in reports and evaluations distinguishing good from bad leaders. Most notably, these included providing personal and professional support, communicating as well as listening, taking needed action, and delegating. Examples of negative dysfunctional side included instances of character flaws, unfairness, self-seeking, and at others' expenses, lying, misjudgment, illegal conduct, all of which were distract from the leaders, standing from the followers. A survey showed that a base for executive incompetence was at least at 50%. And another study from the mid-1950s onward has shown 60 to 75% of organizational respondents reporting that their immediate supervisor as the worst or most stressful aspect of their job. Poor performance can also seriously impede the organizational successful operations. Their responsibilities for performance is somehow deflected from them. There are many examples, but one example is of the GM chairman from 1981 to 1990. They unprecedentedly dropped 20% company shares in the U.S. market when he was the chairman of GM. He was unable to adapt to the needs of the market, and when asked by Fortune magazine to explain what went wrong with losing 40%, or i.e. billions or millions of dollars, he simply said, "I don't know, it's a mysterious thing." Commenting on this statement, Robert Samuelson said, "As a society, we have spent the past decade paying for mistakes like Smith's." Yet the organization continued to reward him, as we see in other companies. Incompetence does not always mean that they won't get paid. On his retirement, the GM board increased his already generous pension to over $1 million a year. This continuous system for compensation contrasts with one that would show the discipline and unity of purpose represented in teamwork, aimed at openly stated performance goals and related procedures. Truly achieving these goals demands a concern for leader-follower relations that maintain responsibility, accountability, authenticity, and integrity. Indeed, a so-called crisis of leadership usually reveals a severe lack of these elements. It is purposeful to value them as universally acceptable. Benjamin Vick here again. I'm going to be going over the final section before the conclusion and the conclusion. Charisma and its effects, ethically and otherwise. Contemporary with Freud's concept of the leader as an ego ideal was the idea of the charismatic leader, to whom followers are drawn with loyalty and devotion, according to Max Weber, a German sociologist who studied bureaucracy. However, he stated that charisma is not just a quality of the leader, but an attribute invested by followers, especially in a time of crisis. He said charisma may be withdrawn by them if the leader is long unsuccessful. However, though, the term comes from the Greek word divine gift. It can be viewed as followers giving a great amount of credit to a leader. Weber had conceived charisma to be one part of acceptance by followers of a leader's various bases for claiming legitimacy. Ethically speaking, the leader also may use his or her charismatic appeal for personal or social gain, so charisma is not seen as an unmixed good. Hodgkinson said, "Beware charisma," and Jane Hall and Bruce Avola have observed the need to distinguish more between ethical and unethical charismatic leaders. Unethical leaders are more likely to use charisma to enhance power over followers for self-serving ends in a calculated, manipulative way. Ethical leaders are likelier to use charisma in constructive ways to serve others and social goals. When James McGregor Burns advanced his concept of the transformational leader who changes the attitudes and behaviors of followers, he regarded it as having a moral basis, yielding beneficial ends. Yet, charisma was considered in connection with such leaders as the quality often imputed to them. Charisma usually is invoked still as a term of almost general approval in the corporate world as well as politics. Charismatic leaders are often sought as saviors, but they may present difficulties such as tendencies toward narcissism. And so, in conclusion, although this presentation is organizationally based, its themes and emphasis have larger implications at the societal level. Resonating with concerns about the effects of power and distance, one point clearly is that leaders' characteristics affect followers by shaping their perception and responses. Indeed, this link between perception and behavior tests the ethics of leadership actions as well as others' attributes perceived by the followers and the response to those attributes. The other end of the scale, poor leaders create conditions for lack of success, as Hackman pointed out. Clearly, there are ethical challenges in the use of authority and power, highlighted here in regards to open communication. Among these are the potential for destructive effect on the social contract between the leader and the follower. Being a leader allows more influence and power over other outcomes, an event more broadly. The leader also has many benefits and privileges, including higher financial reward and the freedom to keep at a distance if desired. But these benefits come at a price of responsibility and accountability, where the leader is seen to be power-oriented, exploitative, and self-serving. Especially in the face of failure and goal of mutual identification is hardly attainable. Instead, followers may feel alienated, and the prospect continues to be a vital challenge.